So this piece is originally for vihuela, and it's an arrangement of a 4-part chanson. So you want to keep that in mind. And I have a capo on the 3rd fret, kind of just to raise the pitch level to be more similar to a vihuela. And I've also detuned the 3rd string down to F sharp, so I can use the original fingerings in the original Italian tablature. This is Spanish music, but it's written in something that we now call Italian tablature. And of course, I've made my addition in modern notation, so all the voices will be relatively clear. So let me start the lesson by reading you some of the translated original text. So the original French chanson reads, "1,000 regrets at deserting you and leaving behind your loving face. I feel so much sadness and such painful distress that it seems to me my days will soon dwindle away." So very emotional little work, and I definitely encourage you to listen to as many versions of the chanson as you can. You know, the original is in 4 parts with voice, right? So you want to hear that and make sure you really know that version. And then you can start listening to various other versions of the work so that you build an awareness of how people would arrange this piece and how they would go about treating it. And that'll give you some insight as to how Narvaez would conceptualize the piece before playing it on the instrument, because he would have heard the piece performed a lot and would know about the music, and then he's transferring it to the vihuela. So you want to make sure that that you know what the context is for the original, and then how you might transfer it over. So there's not too much to talk about in this piece in terms of playing. You can follow my fingerings in the score or whatever score you're using. In my edition, I fingered it fairly heavily for left-hand fingering. Right hand I've left out, but the left hand is very well fingered. So you can go through it like that, and I've done it to make sure that the voice leading works very well. But that's what we're really going to talk about today, is voice independence and just how to conceptualize playing the piece. I'll point out a few technical parts in the piece as well, but let's have this discussion on what your main focus should be. So when you think about Renaissance music, especially like a 4-part chanson, you really want to be thinking horizontally, so that all these individual musical lines kind of traveling horizontally from left to right, and you're tracking how each voice connects to the next note, whether that be across a bar line or across a whole phrase or just a little tiny motivic fragment. But you want to be tracking the voices. What you don't want to do is get too wrapped up in the modern ideas of chords. You know, when a chord hits, it's really easy on the guitar to think, oh, A minor chord, oh, B minor. We think like these vertical interruptions, but all of this music really works in a horizontal way, and you want to be thinking in terms of voice leading and voice independence. So you might be tracking the individual lines, like an upper line. So tracking the individual lines like that, but maybe you're tracking the bass voice. You know, tracking that individual line to its completion is really important, and it's really easy in this piece, like in bar 7, to let go of notes. Now I just let go of the bass note, and it's not that noticeable because there's other activity happening, but that F sharp needs to connect to the E that comes next. So in bar 7, have to connect all of those lines horizontally. And same thing goes for the middle line, right? So you don't want to let go of any of those notes. So one of your primary focuses in this piece is going to be sustaining the notes. Now, to some extent, if you just leave your fingers down as long as possible without arbitrarily lifting them off, that'll really help. And a lot of the early lute tutor books and whatnot, and vihuela said, just like leave your fingers down until they're needed again, and that will really help with sustain. But of course, if we want to maximize the voice independence, we must hold on to the individual notes for as long as possible. Now, I've tried to notate it in that way. The original is in Italian tablature, right? So you don't know what the individual sustain levels of each note is. But they would know because they would know the tune and they would be connected to that Renaissance aesthetic. And so you have to get into it. And I've notated it and tried to make it clear that you have to sustain notes for certain values. So just make sure that you're really holding your fingers down and that once you've learned the piece, you go over it again. Almost start back from the beginning. Once you know all the fingerings, you know all the shapes and everything from a technical standpoint, go over the whole piece again with this sustain and voice independence idea in mind and carefully go through the whole piece with a fine comb, just making sure you're not lifting the piece. You know, I did a little video for someone's channel this week. You can see it on the site or the YouTube channel. And I talked about this. I actually recorded some of this piece and critiqued myself. And yeah, I lifted some notes by accident. So it was really useful to record myself first. So you might want to do that, is just record yourself playing the piece and then just like look at the score and like carefully track each voice, listening to hear if you accidentally lifted your finger arbitrarily and just didn't sustain a voice. So that's definitely what I would recommend. A couple of small technical tidbits in this piece. There's not too much to talk about. This little barré at bar 27, pretty easy. Just be careful that you don't get too much squeak on the way down. By the way, when you're playing all these individual lines too, you might want to get a little bit of strong weak happening. Strong weak, strong weak, strong weak, yada, yada, yada. Kind of connected to that lute technique of thumb and finger. I don't want to do it on guitar, but lots of like pulsating like that. It's all legato and you want to keep it fairly even and smooth, but a little bit of rhythmic interest would be good. So, but that barré, just try to lift a little bit with your second finger to avoid the squeak. It's such a delicate texture and so beautiful that too much squeak in this case might be overkill. So just follow the fingerings most of the time. Keep sustaining notes. When you get to bar 63, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, bar 68, there is this little hinge bar, which might not be comfortable for everyone, but what you do is you barre on the on at least the third string and the second string, and then you lift your finger up so the first open string can ring. This is a common thing that we do in lots of our music, soar even and onward. We do these little hinge bars. If you want, you could refinger it 1, 2, 4 if you really hate that hinge bar. But essentially your barre is over third string and the second string. Some people it won't bother, other people you may want to refinger it. I'll leave that up to you. There is one other part. In bar 62, there's quite a stretch. Which might be a little uncomfortable for some people. But your options are pretty limited here. Either you can play it with your first finger, but then you have to drop the bass sustain. So that's one option. You could just let go of the bass sustain, but that kind of breaks the rule that we were talking about of voice independence. The only other option, I mean, I fingered it with the stretch, which is a little bit absurd, but it does work. So that's the good thing, right? It works. So you can either let go of the bass sustain, or you could raise that note up an octave. It's not the most desirable thing to do. But then you kind of have to leave it anyway, unless you, let's see. So you could refinger it. That could work. You'd have to get into it somehow. It's not the best for that bass voice because you're gonna have this big leap in it, so it's not ideal, but it's something you could explore if you wish. Otherwise, just follow my fingering, and you know, all you have to do is like kind of get that first note. It's a slow texture. There's a half note before it. Take your time, and then you're home free. The other thing, I'll just talk about one or two more things. In terms of the right hand, I mean, I play the bass line with my thumb and generally the other fingers with alternating IMA. Lots of the chords, I wouldn't roll or strum too many of the chords. Because it's like a vocal work, I would keep that in mind, that there wouldn't be a lot of rolling, although on the vihuela you can hear lots of rolls of the when a chord appears. But I would just keep it to a minimum, especially at the moments when you think Narvaez is like really imitating the vocal work. So for example, the last couple bars, it's just like 4-part harmony. It's or a 4-part chanson, and you could just really hear the 4 parts really clearly. I think sometimes when you roll chords, it just turns them into chords rather than 4 individual notes or voices, right? You kind of just hear this like strummed chord. It sounds, it breaks it up a little bit. So you can listen to lots of the vocal recording, and you can listen to lots of vihuela playing it and kind of make your decisions. I roll some of the chords sometimes when there's not too much voice independence happening. So, and then try to keep it block chords going at other times to try to hear the voices going horizontally. So I'll leave that one up to you. And I hope you enjoy the piece. It's one of the most beautiful works we have from the Renaissance, and certainly one of the most popular pieces from the Renaissance as well.